Hells Angels bikie gangs is behind shootings in Adelaide's northern suburbs.
Members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang accused of running a racketeering ring, which included robbery, extortion, and murder.
3 Hells Angels members accused of that shooting on Sunday that injured 7 stood in front of a judge today.
Hells Angels.
Hells Angels.
Hells Angel.
The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club started out as a group for bike lovers who enjoyed riding Harley-Davidson bikes together. However, the increased occurrence of criminal activities and use of violence by the club's members has shown that the club's purpose has greatly evolved as time passed. The group has created a number of dangerous men who were not afraid to put their acts of violence on display for the world to see. In today's video, we will be talking about the most dangerous Hells Angels in history. Michael Sky Langlo. Michael Langlo began his criminal career as one of the founders of the Poppy Moto Club, which was founded in 1964. For the next few years, membership of the club speedily increased, and by 1970, the club already had 7 chapters. The club got affiliated to the Dubois brothers in the early 1970s. Members of the club started serving as hired assassins for the Dubois brothers and for Montreal Mafia. Once they became fully grounded in criminal activities, Poppy members started dealing drugs for the brothers. The club soon became known for their violence and sadistic acts, so much that out of 350 outlaw biker clubs at the time, Poppy Moto Club was regarded as the most violent biker club in Quebec. As their names spread, they caught the attention of Hells Angels who have an affinity to violence. In 1977, Hells Angels Motorcycle Club took Poppy's under their wing to create the first HAMC chapter in Canada. Being merged with the Hells Angels, the club experienced rapid growth that by 1979, the Montreal chapter got divided into Montreal North and Montreal South chapters. The North chapter had more Poppy members than the South chapter, which meant that the North chapter displayed more acts of violence and drug abuse. Langlo soon became the club's national president and took on the task of expanding the club's presence into other cities. At some point, the North chapter abuse of drugs and alcohol became concerning to other chapters. The situation got out of hand when the North chapter started stealing the profits money made from their drug trade, profits that were meant for other chapters. Hence, certain high-ranking members of other chapters came together and agreed to take down the North chapter. They feared that the chapter was putting the club's existence at risk, as members were often getting arrested in possession of drugs. The North chapter was taken down in March 1985 in what is known as the Lennoxville Massacre. Other members of the club gathered and killed 5 members of the North chapter, after which their bodies were wrapped in sleeping bags and dumped in the St. Lawrence River. Langlo was part of the planning process and made sure that their personal effects were properly disposed of. Later that year, Langlo and 29 other members of HAMC were arrested in connection to the Lennoxville Massacre, but Langlo was released while awaiting trial. He immediately grabbed the opportunity, fled the country, and settled down in Morocco. In April 1988, after 2 years of being on the run, Langlo and 2 other Hells Angels members returned to Canada and willingly turned themselves in. Langlo was convicted of being an accessory to murder and was given a 2-year sentence. After his release, Langlo continued in his life of crime, importing and selling drugs for the club. In October 1998, Langlo was dragged into a drug case after his associate, Robert Sivard, was arrested while trying to cross the Canadian border into the United States carrying 178 kilograms of cocaine. Langlo was then charged with importing and conspiracy to import cocaine. After pleading guilty in July 1999, Langlo was received a $20,000 fine and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. After serving his time, Langlo decided to turn a new leaf. He stepped down from his position as Hells Angels leader and returned to his hometown to become a farmer. Langlo tried his best to correct his lifestyle, but his connection to the Hells Angels was far from over. In April 2009, Langlo was arrested alongside 156 people who were all indicted for the brutal Quebec biker wars, which lasted between 1994 and 2002 and claimed over 100 lives. In March 2015, Langlo pleaded guilty to general conspiracy to commit murder during the Quebec Wars and was sentenced to 9 months in prison. But that was not the end of Langlo being hunted by his past. In April 2018, Langlo was arrested again after he unexpectedly told an undercover cop about the extent of his drug trade. It turned out that after spending time in jail, he still returned to his criminal life and was proud of himself. He told the undercover cop that he was part of a drug ring that distributed 300,000 pills of methamphetamine between 2017 and 2018. This time around, Langlo had exposed himself by bragging about his drug involvement. He pleaded guilty to drug trafficking, conspiracy, and gangsterism, and was sentenced to 58 months in prison. He was released on parole in July 2021, with a strict warning from the parole board forbidding him from communicating or meeting up with Hells Angels members. George Wethern. George Wethern's early history with the Hells Angels is not known, but he belonged to the Oakland chapter and was popularly known as Baby Huey to club members. Wethern was a close friend of Hells Angels president Sonny Barger, and that sort of have him an upper hand in the club. Wethern rose rapidly in the ranks and soon became the vice president of the Oakland chapter. Being the vice president meant he would be overseeing the activities, drug trade, and illegal businesses the chapter engaged in. Wethern served in that position for a number of years and later decided to change his ways. He officially left the club in 1970, but remained friends with many members, and that turned out to be a big mistake. Years after he left the club, Wethern came face to face with the authorities due to an entanglement which stemmed from his continued friendship with the club's members. At the time, one Hells Angels member, William "Whispering Bill" Pfeiffer, was suffering from throat cancer and was on the verge of death. He decided it was time to turn his back on the club and became a government informant in exchange for an immunity deal. He gave the government information about the club's hidden crimes. He left a trail of information that would lead the police to George Wethern, who was living a peaceful life with his wife on their 156-acre ranch. Wethern was shocked when the police raided his compound. Pfeiffer had given them enough information, and it didn't take long for them to uncover 3 dead bodies within the compound. The bodies had been properly hidden in abandoned wells, and it would have taken the police days to search the entire property. However, with Pfeiffer's help, the search was made easier. The first body found belonged to an unidentified woman who had been killed by a bullet to the head. The other 2 bodies were identified as 30-year-old Charles Barker and 24-year-old Big Tom Shull. Both Barker and Shull were still prospects trying to become full-patched Hells Angels members, but they went out of line and tried to stage a coup in the club. Pfeiffer confessed that the 2 men unknowingly drank coffee that was purposely spiked with LSD. After a few minutes, they passed out and were strangled to death by other members of the club. It is very common for clubs to take out members who tried to cause trouble or disturb the peace of the club. The police was led to believe that the club used its money to purchase the ranch in George Wethern's name with the aim of using it to hide the bodies of people they killed. However, dead bodies were not the only incriminating things the police found during the raid. They also found weapons and illegal drugs in the compound, which gave them more reason to arrest George and his wife. Going by Pfeiffer's confession, the police suspected that up to 12 other bodies had been buried on the property, so they continued searching the compound. In exchange for an immunity deal, Wethern turned into a state witness and gave the police the information they needed to find the remaining bodies on the property. He had already left the club, but refusing to cut ties with its members led him into trouble. Wethern told the court everything he knew about Hells Angels members who were involved in killing all the people whose bodies were found on the property. For his extensive help to the police, Wethern was allowed to share a cell with his wife. One fateful day in 1972, while still in police custody, Wethern asked his wife to pass him some pencils, and before anyone could recognize his plan, Wethern violently stabbed his eyes using the pencils. His reason for destroying his eyes are unknown, but it may have been his way of punishing himself for becoming an informant and turning his back on the club. Wethern and his family were later moved to an unknown location and kept under witness protection. Years later, Wethern published his book, A Wayward Angel, which he co-wrote with a journalist and writer Vincent Colnett. Maurice "Mom" Boucher. As a teenager, Maurice Boucher had a nonchalant behavior towards school and finally dropped out in grade 9. As a dropout, it became easy for Boucher to fall into a life of crime. By the time he was 19, Boucher already had a criminal record for stealing $200 from a convenience store. In 1974, Boucher made an effort to get his life together. He got a job at a construction company and tried to keep it. Unfortunately, he was unable to keep the job for more than a week because he had become an alcoholic and a drug addict. When he couldn't get money to fund his addiction to drugs, Boucher went back to his criminal ways. In November that year, he got arrested when he broke into a grocery store and tried to steal 23 packs of cigarettes. He was sentenced to 6 months in detention for breaking and entering. After spending time in detention, most people would easily refrain from committing crimes, but not Boucher. He was arrested again in November 1975 for breaking into a butcher's shop carrying a rifle. He stole not more than a few bucks from the shop, but was caught as he was leaving. This time, he was charged with armed robbery and got a 40-month sentence. When he got out in 1979, Boucher secured a job in a plastic factory in Montreal. He took the job seriously and maintained it for 4 years. However, Boucher's love for crime kept boiling inside of him until he turned around and went back into his criminal ways. Boucher was normally into petty crimes, but in September 1984, he committed a heinous crime by raping a 16-year-old at gunpoint. Once again, he was arrested and sentenced to another 40 months in jail. Being in jail did not stop Boucher from committing more crimes. He developed a want to illegally collect unemployment insurance funds and kept it up for his entire prison term. As soon as he got out of jail, Boucher joined the Hells Angels Club in Montreal. Boucher was enthusiastic, and that helped him rise quickly in the club, and by May 1987, he had become a full patch member of the club. There are people who believe that for Boucher to get his full patch, he had to assassinate the leader of a rival biker gang. Boucher soon got the nickname Mom for his meticulous behavior and his ability to pay attention to every little detail. He would incessantly question other members of the club to make sure that whatever they planned was going smoothly. The others thought he behaved like a mother would to her child, hence the name Mom. As Boucher rose through the ranks, he slowly became powerful and was running several criminal businesses like loan sharking and peddling drugs. In 1995, Boucher created a new chapter of the Hells Angels known as the Nomads. The Nomad chapter was made up of many high-ranking members of the club in Quebec, and Boucher was the chapter's president. The chapter allowed its members to move from place to place as they were not restricted to one location. In 1995, Boucher had to spend a few months in jail after he was found in possession of a handgun. While in jail, Boucher got into a squabble with the prison's warden. A few months later, the warden's house was set ablaze and burnt to the ground. It turns out the house was burnt by masked men who were riding Harley-Davidson bikes, which is the usual bike brand for Hells Angels members. In August 1995, Boucher and one of his associates came up with a plan to kill one Hells Angels member in order to influence the public's opinion against the Rock Machine, a rival motorcycle club. Boucher hand-picked a Hells Angels low-level drug dealer to achieve his mission. Boucher ordered for the man's car to be rigged with a remote-controlled bomb, which exploded, claiming his life, as well as that of an 11-year-old boy who was playing around the car when the bomb detonated. In a bid to win the war between the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine, Boucher ordered the murder of 2 correctional officers who were picked at random. Boucher's reason for murdering the officers was a sinister plan to get more bikers to commit heinous crimes. The crimes would be so bad that if they were ever caught, prosecutors wouldn't be willing to offer them deals. Boucher was arrested in 2002. He was convicted of the murders and was sentenced to 3 life sentences at a supermax prison in Canada. While in prison, several attempts were made on his life, but he somehow managed to survive them. Boucher died in July 2022 from throat cancer. Adam Lee Hall. Although no one knows when Adam Hall joined the Hells Angels chapter in Massachusetts, his name became known in February 2014 when he was convicted of 3 counts of murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation. The end of Hall's criminal career began in July 2009 when he mercilessly beat up David Glasser using a baseball bat. When Hall realized that he would face a harsh sentence if Glasser was allowed to testify against him in court. He started making efforts to make Glasser look unreliable as a witness. The first thing Hall did was to try and frame Glasser for a fake armed robbery, but his plan failed. So Hall decided to handle the situation by putting an end to Glasser. In August 2011, just a few weeks before Glasser would testify, Hall, alongside two other accomplices, abducted Glasser, his roommate, Edward Frampton, and their friend, Robert Chadwell. The three men were in their apartment in Pittsfield when Adam Hall, Caius Viovis, and David Chalu attacked and kidnapped them. Hall and his friends killed, dismembered, and buried the three men in a trench in Beckett. Hall heartlessly killed Glasser to stop him from testifying, but he killed the other men to totally eliminate all witnesses to the murder. Unknown to Hall, killing Glasser wasn't going to stop him from landing in jail. While Hall was a full member of the Hells Angels, his accomplice, Caius Viovis, was not yet a member of the club at the time. It is believed that Caius agreed to partake in the murders in order to prove his loyalty and to enable him get access into the club. And even though he was not yet a member of the club, Viovis turned out to be the most dangerous one of the three men. From a young age, Viovis began to exhibit characters that gave off the impression that he was a human vampire. He was passionately attached to topics of murder and drinking of blood. Caius Viovis was born Roy Gutfinski Jr., but in 2008, he decided to change his name to Caius. Some believe that he picked the name Caius from the vampire movie series Twilight, while Viovis was the name of a Roman god who is said to have escaped from hell. Aside from being a cold-hearted killer, Viovis' facial features were another terrifying aspect of his personality. The most prominent feature on his forehead are the subdermal implants, which looked like horns, then the spikes in his nose and brows. His face is much more disturbing to look at, as it is covered in tattoos with the number 666 imprinted on his forehead. Viovis' affinity to blood came to headlines in 1999 when he and his 17-year-old girlfriend managed to lure a younger girl into their motel room. The two soon began cutting the girl's back with a razor blade, after which they started to lick the girl's blood while kissing. Viovis later stated in court that he was a devil worshipper and a vampire with a huge appetite for blood. He and his girlfriend were convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Not long after Viovis got out of jail, he was back looking for more blood to spill while trying to join the HAMC. Like Viovis, David Chalu was also trying to join the club when they were arrested for the murder of Glasser and his friends. Adam Lee Hall, David Chalu, and Caius Viovis were all convicted of murder and kidnapping, among other charges. They were all sentenced to life in prison without parole. Yves Trudeau. Yves Trudeau is popular for being one of Hell's Angels' highly feared assassins. Early in his life, Trudeau showed an affinity to explosives and military-grade weapons, but his love for biker gangs and their lifestyle was much more. He began his journey as a criminal in 1968 when he joined the Poppy Moto Club. His fascination for explosions helped him get a job in an explosive factory. Within a short period, he became an expert in the art of making bombs. He gained all the knowledge required to create explosives with whatever he could. With this knowledge, Trudeau easily became an important asset to the Poppies. Trudeau was already an expert assassin by the time the Poppies merged with the Hells Angels in 1977. His bombing skills soon earned the nickname the Mad Bomber or Apache. News of his skills traveled, and it didn't take long before other biker gangs in Quebec began hiring him for their dirty work. The first time Trudeau killed under the Hells Angels was in February 1978. That night, he was at a bar where Hells Angels members often hung around. Two members of another biker gang called the Outlaws were having a drink in the same bar. They got so drunk that they got kicked out by Hells Angels members who were there. The two men refused to leave and instead stood in front of the bar spewing bad words against the Angels. Standing in front of the club was the mistake they made because a car soon emerged out of nowhere and Trudeau opened fire at the two men, killing one and leaving the other in a critical state. That incident would be the beginning of a bloody biker war between Hells Angels and the Outlaws. Trudeau was always ready to kill as long as he was ordered to do it. He murdered two Hells Angels members who were causing problems for the club. Trudeau later became partners with Mike Blass, and the two worked together for a while. Trudeau's reputation as the club's best assassin was known widely, as he was known to always complete any contract he was given, no matter the difficulty of the task. During the Hells Angels war against the Outlaws, a total of 23 outlaw members were killed by Hells Angels, and 18 of them were killed by none other than Trudeau. In 1984, Trudeau used his expert explosive skills to build a bomb using 16 kills of C4 plastic explosives. He then hid the bomb inside a TV set, while his partner Mike Blass delivered it to the target's home, where 4 men were hanging out. When the bomb exploded, it shattered the apartment's windows, killing the 4 men. With his success as an assassin, he became the first Canadian Angel to earn the Filthy Few patch. This patch was reserved for Angels who proved their loyalty by killing for the club. After the Montreal chapter of the Hells Angels got divided, Trudeau fell into the North chapter, whose members were known to abuse the drugs they sold. Due to his line of work, Trudeau soon became addicted to cocaine, as he would use the drugs to ease the guilt of killing a person. His addiction to cocaine made him a target to be killed in the Lennoxville massacre. However, he was lucky enough to narrowly escape death because he had checked himself into a rehabilitation center a few days before the incident. News about the Lennoxville massacre scared Trudeau enough to become a government witness in order for his sentence to be reduced. Trudeau eventually admitted to murdering a total of 43 people between 1979 and 1985. Trudeau was convicted and sentenced to prison with the possibility of parole after 7 years. The Hells Angels' history is filled with hardened criminals who never shied away from using violence, but they have all paid for their crimes in one way or another. However, the Hells Angels will continue to be regarded as a group for people who love and revel in violence.